crux of our STEM Extension are our faculty and staff instructors who develop the modules and come up with the curriculum that's going to be presented. And then they deliver that curriculum over the course of the weekend, so they're the leaders of the modules that I showed on the last slide. We have 8 science mentors who are graduate students and undergraduate students who are responsible for translating the science for the high school students. So 5 of those mentors are volunteers from the MRSEC, they're graduate students, and then 3 are undergraduate students who are actually pulled from our larger Science U summer camp program. And we pulled them into work this weekend because we think they have aptitude toward this program and interest as well. And beyond that, we have resident assistants who are with the Summer Academy program, and they're really the student experts that are living with the students and know a lot about their abilities and how to make things accessible for those for that population of students. And this has really been an ongoing, this is a story of an ongoing conversation we're having with our partners. At the beginning, they wanted to just try it out, and we said, sure, we can dip our toes in, we'll do a half day, we'll see how it goes, and everybody thought it was fantastic. So we said, okay. They wanted everything at that point. They said, give us a whole week. We want a whole week of programming. We said, okay, we can do that. We'll make that happen for you. We can figure out how to make that work. So we did a whole week, and that was sort of overwhelming for everybody. Summer Academy is a really intense program, and we tacked our program on to the end, and at the end of the 3 weeks, everyone went, that was really exhausting. I don't think we need a whole week after all. So we pulled back and did 3 days last year, and that worked really well. So I think the history is just sort of an example of how important it is to keep those lines of communication open, continue to assess what's going well for your program, and how you can evolve that over time to keep meeting, sort of changing goals. Yes?
We can interrupt as it goes along, but if we want to hold this to the end, so that the first one, the half-day event,
Yep.
how do you get started, and can you flesh out more what happened in that day?
Yeah, actually, one of our partners who works at the MRSEC, this Summer Academy has been at Penn State for much longer than we've been working with them. So they had their 3-week learning how to navigate college, life skills focused program, and they were always in the dining halls. And our programs are also, our other camps are also in the dining hall. So we'd keep seeing this group of kids who are, navigating with canes and with seeing eye dogs. And one of our partners just was talking to someone at BBBS being like, do you have, just in a conversation, do you have any, what do you focus on in your program? Do you have any science or math or anything in there? And she was like, we don't have any academic content, it's purely life skills. And so I think they started talking about is there a place to put STEM content into your program? And that's where for the next year, so it was already it was the summer before, and we were planning for 2016, and they figured for the half day on Saturday, because they program straight through the weekends, 3 straight weeks, we could do science is the fun thing on Saturday morning for all the kids. And so that's how, and then we had to plan backwards from, okay, this half day, what content are we going to do? How are we going to structure it? So they actually did a mini forensics case, and they actually went through one of the cottages on campus that's used as a crime scene. They are collecting evidence, lots of accommodations that had to be put in there. So that is how it started. And then after that, they were like, yes, whole week, and then the whole conversation went from there.
I saw the slide earlier. Did you do this with Envision? Did I see Envision?
Envision is a separate event that we run. Are you familiar with a different version of Envision, maybe?
Envision is what we call our STEM Career Day for young women, so it's not related to this at all.
So
there's a national organization that supports the blind called Envision.
Really?
Oh, really?
Huh.
We're familiar with the National Federation for the Blind, but I've never heard of Envision before.
So separate Envision. One thing that I'll point out is you can see that the number of students that we were focusing changed each year. We started out with all the students. We went down to a self-identified 12 students that were interested in STEM, and then this past year we went back out to the full group of students. And this really had to do with sort of our understanding of the goals of our partnering organizations and what they wanted to demonstrate. And we really thought with the second year, maybe we just want to do STEM-focused students. And at the end of that, we weren't really able to say whether or not we'd increased anybody's interest in STEM because they were already interested in STEM. And that was one of our goals and one of the goals of our partnering organization. So we said, no, we really need to involve everybody so that we're able to meet that goal. So again, just that ongoing dialogue.
Yeah, and I think a few other sessions have talked about the importance of piloting something with a new partner before you do anything more to formalize it. And it's definitely true in this case. because we saw how much work went into planning a half day of science for students who are blind and visually impaired. So we knew it was going to be a monster to plan any more from that, but we were prepared for it. Also, if you pilot a half day, it's very inexpensive because you can get people to volunteer for half a day. So once you're like, people are motivated, it's great, it works, like now we need money for it, where do we can get it? So piloting is a good way to test it out before significant funds have to be invested into a program like this.
All right. Should we still show the video?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to show a video that was it's sort of a recap of last year, and it does a better job than I will do of sort of covering the. If I can find my mouse. Does a better job than I can do of covering sort of a summary of the program. Yeah, how to work here.
STEM Career Night, and the participants are members of the Summer Academy program, which takes place at Penn State each summer. And we're excited to have them. It's about 30 high school students who are college-bound, who are spending 3 weeks at Penn State to learn how to navigate a college campus.
So STEM Career Night, students who are part of Summer Academy come here and they get an introduction to what the different options available to them in STEM are. So we have science table, technology table, engineering, and math. The two science tables that we have here tonight are forensic science and chemistry, and the tables are all staffed by either graduate students or undergraduate students here from Penn State. We're not only introducing the Summer Academy students to these fields and the options that are available to them in these fields, but also to their own personal stories.
So they're learning about the physics of electric circuits. We started off by learning about that electricity needs a complete path to flow. It's a choice. They have both buzzers and LEDs in them. And so they could, by touching two ends, they would complete the path. They could make, as a whole group, they could make a circle, and they would all, as a group, be part of a complete electric circuit. Once they learned about how to complete electric circuits, and they made electric circuits with light bulbs, buzzers, modules, and LED. And next, they are looking at series of parallel circuits. So I gave them these 3D printed circuit diagrams that they could feel battery, they could feel a resistor, and another resistor with 2 light bulbs, and build those circuits.
The National Science Foundation recognizes and very much values the fact that science today requires the collective approach from many different disciplines. And those different disciplines have to converge to solve the complex problems that are facing us. And this program provides an opportunity to make sure that none of the talent is missing.
So working with this particular group of students is actually very helpful for what we do in forensic science. Forensics tends to be a very visual medium, and so everybody just depends on their sight observation to do everything. And there are a lot of different adaptations that you can use for people who are blind or low vision that actually can be incorporated into the forensics we're doing.
Working with these students in this experience, it has really impacted my understanding as a teacher in finding areas where students are struggling and really understanding how to deal with those struggles, how to overcome different obstacles. And a lot of the struggles that these individuals have are the same as sighted individuals, sighted students would have. So it just gives you a better appreciation for how difficult it is to learn these topics.
Our hope is during this time, our students will learn different things about working in the STEM fields and opportunities available for them that they never thought of before. Being able to go back to their high school science classes and talk to their teachers about experiences that they had using science equipment, lab equipment, and being out in a beautiful arboretum and learning about plants that maybe they didn't think they had the opportunity to do so before, and educating their high school teachers and helping them to take that experience and bring it to the college environment.
One of our primary goals at the Office of Science Outreach is to involve
College of Science students and faculty in doing outreach with populations that might not get involved in STEM otherwise. So we want to make sure that we are both bringing science to them and bringing them into science environments, but also getting our faculty and students involved in that endeavor.
A lot of the students that I met with were chemistry majors, and I didn't realize how broad that subject is and how there's so many different things about it. And I was interested a little bit in chemistry, but now I feel like that might be something that I want to look more into. And I think this has given everyone a lot of different experiences and just meeting new people, and I think it's great that we've got to meet so many people that are pursuing STEM careers.
I didn't think that like this would ever be a job. Somebody with like a visual impairment, like that's in crime, like who would ever think somebody with a visual impairment could do such a thing? Or like working with electricity, I mean, I kind of got like a sense that like you do that, but not the extent that I learned.
So you can get a sense, hopefully, for just sort of the breadth and variety of different people that are involved in making this project happen. So the goals of this project are sort of threefold. We have separate sets of goals for students and instructors and mentors, and that really comes down to us recognizing this program stands to impact far more than just the students, although that was the original intent. Was to increase their confidence and their interest in STEM and their ability to advocate for themselves in the STEM classroom. We thought about it and we said, no, this is really going to go far beyond that. So aside from the goals that we have for student participants, for instructors, we're really hoping that this program helps them gain the skills and awareness of specific techniques that they can use to make their lessons accessible. And to understand the capabilities of this particular population and to gain exposure to individuals from this particular population. And the goals for student mentors are largely the same. It's just to gain experience working with this population, an understanding of their capabilities, and really in the end an ability to advocate for this population and to work with this population in the future. Those were really our primary goals.
And it really did come through in a lot of our conversations with the staff and volunteers in the program afterwards. Some of our graduate students especially were like, I didn't realize I had these implicit biases about the capabilities of people with disabilities because I've never met someone who was blind before. So I had a lot of assumptions about what these people can do, what they're capable of, until I worked with a bunch of them for a whole weekend, and they are just normal high school students. They're just as curious as everybody else and just capable. There's just specific ways you have to work with them to enable them to learn. Did you have a question?
Yeah, what training did you give the instructors and the mentors?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
So that's something that I'll talk a little bit more about later, but we do work with the Bureau of Blindness and Visual Services to offer what we call Blindness 101 training, which is usually about a 3 or 4 hour training where we're just getting them up to speed on how to work with individuals that are blind and visually impaired. And it's a lot of things that once you've heard it, it just sounds like common sense, but something that everyone's instinct immediately when you're showing someone something is to say, oh, look at this here. And no, if you can't see, you don't know where here is. So just sort of like guiding someone, basic things like that really make those little interactions go much more smoothly.
Yeah, and they are really the small things. Like when your guiding groups say, can you come forward and follow the sound of my voice, and then we'll turn to your left. You have to be very use your words to be very, very descriptive, which is why I think it was helpful for the people who worked in the program in other contexts, as you learn how to really describe yourself very, very accurately. And also part of the training, I think they always do to get people in the mindset of what it feels like to be blind. They have specific goggles that are put to different visual abilities. Like I don't know the name of it, but some of the students can only see out of a pinhole in each eye, so they can see fine, but just out of a very small range. Some can only see, in very just restricted visual fields. And so they actually have you wear these goggles and try to do some daily things. You practice guiding each other. One person's blindfolded, the other person's guiding them, so you can take turns experiencing what it's like to navigate the world when you cannot see. So a lot of it is putting themselves into the shoes of the students, because you can never get fully there, but as close as you can get is good.
So this is a conceptual diagram, sort of the different partners that are involved in this project. And I'm going to dive a little bit more into what each of these partners does and talk a little bit about what we have found are important qualities to have in various partners and how each of these fulfills these roles. But just to sort of briefly run through this, at the top of the chart here, we have parents and high school teachers and TVIs, and they're really responsible for identifying the students that are going to come to Summer Academy. So they're the ones that are responsible for encouraging their students, saying, I really think you stand to benefit from Summer Academy, I think you have potential to go to college, and pushing them towards that program. Once they are at Summer Academy and sort of working with BBBS, they are obviously then part of the STEM Extension program just by virtue of the fact that they were there with Summer Academy. So Summer Academy is partnering with us by providing us students as well as I mentioned earlier, RAs. So these are the students that are, the undergraduate students that are working with these high school students throughout Summer Academy, just on the basic life techniques and accessibility, that sort of thing. One partner that's important, very important for Summer Academy, and just by virtue of the fact that that partnership exists, it's important to us as well, is Penn State Conferences and Institutes. They take care of all the dining and housing and transportation needs for Summer Academy throughout the week. Focusing in a little bit on STEM Extension, we have 4 major partners that are important to the program. The first is MRSEC, which supplies, as I said earlier, all the funding for the program, and also there's graduate mentors. The College of Education, which for the past several years, we've recruited a graduate student who does program evaluation for STEM Extension. College of Science faculty who bring content expertise to STEM Extension, without which it really wouldn't happen. And then Science U, which is another program that's run by our office, so sort of a partner, sort of an internal partner that supplies the mentors and a lot of also the logistical infrastructure for STEM Extension. And then of course, what we supply back to BBBS is the STEM Extension programming.
Just to define, TVI is a teacher for the visually impaired, and so they actually work with teachers who are in, the content teachers in schools, and say, how could you now put accommodations into your lesson so that students can access your content. So they're not content experts, but they're the experts on how to accommodate content for students who are blind and visually impaired.
Yep. So this is a broad overview of what types of partners we think really make a strong program. And I'm going to dive into all of these, so I won't list them off here. But this is sort of what we think really makes a strong program. And it's a pretty long list. For STEM Extension, some of these are grouped together. We get some of these benefits from the same partners. Many partners provide us with multiple benefits. However, these different elements are being provided by your partners is totally fine. It's whatever works for your program. But we find that all of these elements are important, so all of these should be coming from somewhere. So the first and maybe most important thing is knowledge of target audience. And this is important for a number of different reasons, not least of which is oftentimes if they have knowledge of the target audience, they already have recruitment pipelines and points of contact established. So if you need to find a target audience, these partners are going to help you locate that target audience, help get that target audience excited and engaged in whatever your program is. It's also important because they're familiar with the needs of the target audience. So they can bring in that expertise and help get everybody else up to speed. So for example, with STEM Extension, this really plays in with that Blindness 101 training. Without BBBS, we would not be grounded in the basics of how to interact with individuals that are blind and visually impaired, and that would make our program run much less smoothly than it does currently. So having that expertise is really important, and we're especially fortunate with STEM Extension because we have BBBS bringing in expertise both broadly in the field of blindness and visual services, but also they have pre-existing knowledge of the individual students we're working with. So they're familiar with their likes and dislikes, their individual abilities, and that's really important for us to be able to work with them more deeply during STEM Extension. So if you can have a partner that's familiar with individuals in your audience, that's great, but that base level knowledge of the needs of the target audience is really important. You need a partner that's familiar with volunteer recruitment and staff recruitment. Oh dear. And for us, for STEM Extension, that's us. We're the partner that provides this particular body of knowledge. But again, you have knowledge of existing recruiting pipelines and points of contact. You have knowledge of techniques for recruiting and training volunteers and staff, which is of course important. They may already have individuals available. So for us, we're able to pull individuals from our Science U program over to work for STEM Extension. But knowing how to get these folks involved, get them up to speed, is important. Knowledge of the institution or logistical knowledge. So again, for us, we're playing a big role as the partners who provide this. We have a lot of program coordination and program management experience, so we know how to make all the logistics of STEM Extension run smoothly. So we bring that to the program so BBDS doesn't have to worry about it. And that's something that they are really thankful for. So we're happy to provide that expertise. Generally, the partner that brings this will have experience with all the different partnering organizations. So they're serving as sort of the middleman, the liaison, helping to facilitate meetings, making sure communication lines are open between all these different partners. They'll often be familiar with the venue, so it helps if the person who is program coordinating and managing is also somebody who's familiar with wherever the program will be happening, so they can make sure that all the resources that need to be available are available. The other big partner that does this for us is conferences and institutes. We wouldn't be able to do this without them being really familiar with all of the dining and housing and transportation pipelines that exist within the behemoth that is Penn State. It can get pretty hairy at times figuring all of that out, so having that insider knowledge is really important.
I want to mention one other thing about this is that whoever is planning the logistics for your program also needs to be very tied to the people who know your target audience really well, because logistics for a program for normally able students is completely different from a program you might need to set up for students with disabilities. For example, like when we were planning that half day, we planned 5 minutes for them to walk between the lab and the cottage, and once they saw that, they were like, we actually need to triple the transportation time between any places because it takes a lot longer for students who are blind to navigate between buildings because they cannot see where they're going, which we would not have thought of, and it would have thrown everything off if we hadn't had that cycle of here's what we're planning and then getting that feedback from the people who really know the target audience.
So that kind of highlights the importance of making sure everybody's involved throughout the process, because even times when you wouldn't think their involvement is important, it usually is. You need partners that have content knowledge, obviously. They need to be able to design and deliver the programming. They don't necessarily need to have experience with your venue or your target audience. So finding content experts that are familiar teaching the audience that you're interested in is not always necessary. We had a lot of faculty that were sort of hesitant to get involved with this because they weren't sure they had the experience. But as long as you have partners that are experienced in getting them up to speed and are willing to work with them throughout the process, then they don't necessarily need to have that pre-existing experience. So the way this works for STEM Extension is we will ask, actually just a week or two ago, we had our final deadline for all of our faculty to finish up their curriculum and their activities, and we sent all of those off to accessibility specialists at BBDS, and they received all their materials and they're going to spend time reviewing them and saying, okay, these activities are good to go. We can easily run these with our students. These are going to be tougher. We need to talk about how to make these accessible. We might need to prep some special materials. So they do a lot of Braille and large print preparation for us. But again, opening that pathway, having that communication between those different partners really helps facilitate the program. Without that open communication and collaboration, that just wouldn't happen. You need to have partners that have connections with funding sources. This is really important. And they need to be familiar with grant application procedures. Usually helps if they're grant awardees. It's good if they already have the money. They need to have, again, this familiarity with existing pipelines and points of contact. This came in to play in a big way with STEM Extension. because after that first year, we decided we wanted to do it again, but there was no funding for it. That funding didn't exist. And so our partner at MRSEC at Penn State said, I know what I can do. I know my NSF program director. I can go to them and I can ask for an extension, which was something that we never would have been familiar with. Certainly BBVS would never have been familiar with. And it was actually a really smooth and painless process getting the money for this program. So having that familiarity there, pre-existing, was really important.
It was a supplement to their grant.
Yes.
What is MRSEC?
So MRSECs are an NSF, it's a type of NSF center. It's a materials research, science and engineering center. Is that right?
Yeah, I do the broader impact for the MRSEC at Princeton. So the NSF funded centers, they're 6-year grants, and every single one of them has a broader impact person who runs all the multiple programs.
Yes. So this is just one of the broader impacts for the MRSEC.
That was
State.
Kristen Breyer,
Kristen.
Yeah.
in the movie, who was the director, education director for the MRSEC.
Yes, that's right.
And what's great about centers is that they usually have much bigger budgets than a single PI grant and the education and outreach usually has to be a big part of it. And so she was able to, talk to her program director and be like, this is the program, it's for a population that's really underserved in STEM. We want to do this. Do you think if we put a supplemental application in, do you think it would go through? And he was like, pretty sure, go ahead and put it through. And because she had that relationship and knew that it's something that she could get NSF funding for, which neither of us would have known, the BBS would not have known. So having someone who was in the NSF grant world as a partner was invaluable, because we figured if we wanted to get longer participation from grad students and from faculty, and she was one also was like, we need to pay people if we want them to be really enthusiastically and committed, involved in a committed way. And so she's like, we have to pay them in order to get that, and so we need to get the money. And so that's where the bulk of the funding need comes from, just like getting that human capital, but so the rest of it's pretty expensive.
You need to have partners that have experience with marketing or media or advocating for programs. This is something that we recognized as being important, especially after some conversations we had with BBVS. They need to be able to share sort of the mission or the goals for the program more broadly. This generates interest in the program, and it generates excitement around the program, and it generates buy-in. And this can be especially important if you're a grant-funded program, because having that sort of public visibility and public excitement can be really important. And it can help attract a broader audience and also potential new partners as well. So having that visibility is really essential. And I'll touch on this a little bit later, but one of the things that BBVS has said they found really important through the years is making sure that you're recognizing your partners for what they're doing and getting them attention in addition to just the program. So making sure that you're giving credit where credit is due and giving folks public accolades is really important. And having people who know how to do that and have sort of existing processes for doing that is really beneficial. And then lastly, having partners that know how to evaluate a program is great. If you know how to do it, that's awesome. I know a lot of people struggle with evaluation, and so having someone who specializes in it is often a good way to go, and that's what we ended up doing. So we brought in College of Education graduate student to do our program evaluation. This is great not only for our internal improvement processes. Obviously, you like to improve your program from year to year, and we use a lot of the data we collect internally. That's actually probably the primary use, is we collect it and we look at it and we assess the program year to year and decide how to make improvements. But obviously it can also be important if you're a funded program, because you need to show that things are changing. One of the things that BBVS came back to us with this year was that they need to show to the state that there is really appreciable change happening with students over the course of STEM Extension Weekend. A lot of our goals prior to this point had been, we're going to increase their confidence in STEM, or their confidence in their ability to advocate, which are really hard to measure. So we had to come up with some new things that we were going to evaluate this year in terms of really tangible things that they were learning over the course of the weekend. But having someone with broad experience in assessment and evaluation who can really help you develop a robust assessment protocol is really beneficial.
And the funds to pay a grad student to do all this evaluation were put into that supplemental funding request as well.
So how did they evaluate that?
Sure. So they use a number of different techniques. Probably the single biggest source of data is exit interviews. They do exit interviews with nearly every student.
They're on camera and
Also they take notes as well. So we conduct those at the end of the weekend. We also are filming nearly constantly throughout the weekend on iPods. We'll set up iPods on tripods and move them around to the different activities. And so they go back afterwards and watch all that tape and take qualitative observations of conversations and just interactions that they observe. They do their own sort of background data collecting over the course of the weekend in terms of observations that they're making. And then there are also pre and post tests, which are given as part of Summer Academy, where we were invited to insert a couple questions. So we get the data from that as well. So all of those different sources come together. So it is a lot of qualitative data, but there's some quantitative data as well. So this is sort of speaking with all of our partners. We asked them, what really makes this program so strong in your eyes in terms of the partnerships that exist? And Jess, were you going to talk about these? Yeah.
And so I think one thing that Karen, I think she was one of the women who spoke in the video, but she's the director of Summer Academy, the entire program. And we were asking her, like, what makes a good partner for you guys? Because we wanted to bring her perspective to this. And she was like, because we work with this unique population, a lot of people come to us and have ideas and kind of drop it on our lap and then like hope we make it happen. But what was different about this relationship was that we actually were committed to helping make something happen. We kept coming back to the table, kept coming back with ideas when situations changed, because she said that was a big thing that a lot of people who approach them do not come with. And so that was, I think, the biggest differentiator on their end. And I think also because we had so many different partners, everyone was included from the beginning, which I know does not always, it's the ideal state. It doesn't always happen because sometimes you bring people in midway, but we really were able to get everyone at the table from the beginning, BBBS, our office, MRSEC, and others, and also discuss like the goals of the program from the beginning. It's like, what are we trying to get out of this weekend or out of this week? And all the decisions that were made logistically or otherwise, content-wise, down the road were made in reference to those goals. So having those, what are our goals, how are we going to evaluate them from the beginning, was also pretty critical. I would say like collective ownership over that, over like where we're going with this, but also like as situations change, we need to evolve the goals of the program. Because actually now in the state of Pennsylvania, they've cut the budget for Summer Academy by a significant amount, like 10-15%, because their charge has changed. Before, BBBS only had to serve people who approached them and tried to and sought out their services, but now they're like, no, you have to serve everyone in the state now. Like, go and seek out all the individual disabilities in your state, and you actually have to serve them all proactively. So they don't have as much funding now to support students who are, just 30 high school students who are coming for a summer. And so we're trying to figure out how can we work with them to help them meet their goals. Can we get STEM into their outreach to the entire state, as since that's their mission now? So instead of thinking, and Karen was really positive about how to deal with and roll with this challenge, but just taking that change as an opportunity as opposed to seeing it as a detriment to the model that we had before. Because if we're trying to work with them as a partner and their charge has changed, then we need to change with them. And the commitment to truly understanding the students being served. BBBS was really adamant about the training, and I feel like having that partner that represents the student with disabilities, enabling them and empowering them to be a really strong voice, because they're the only people who can have the perspective of the students with disabilities. And it was on everything from skills, but also like mindsets down to vocabulary. Like they were very strict about, you cannot call them blind students. You call them students who are blind or visually impaired. The student comes first, which are things that you wouldn't necessarily think are important if you weren't in that world, but they really spoke up for them. And you said you have to refer to them in certain ways and approach them in certain ways. And so that having that kind of training and advocacy for them was really important, and having partners who are open to being taught about that and realizing that I don't actually know what these students are experiencing. And the last one is just what Tim was saying earlier, people who are really genuinely passionate about bringing science to this population. I mean, it was a really great opportunity for us because Penn State is in the middle of Pennsylvania. And State College is not a very it's a fairly privileged area, and so in terms of finding students who are really underrepresented in STEM and working to do programming with them, this was a really unique opportunity for us because people with disabilities are very underserved in STEM. So that was a partnership that really worked on our end as well as theirs.
So just the last thing I want to run through here is where are the broader impacts? Obviously, we're here this week to talk about broader impacts. So I just want to highlight the ways in which all of our partners are impacted by this program, because really everyone is impacted uniquely by STEM extension. So first, and perhaps most obviously, is the high school students and the parents. Aside from increasing some students' interest in STEM, which was one of the goals of the program, it's also attracted a new audience to Summer Academy. There are some students that have come to Summer Academy specifically because of the availability and uniqueness of the STEM Extension weekend. Nothing like this really exists for Summer Academy, for students that are blind and visually impaired outside of Summer Academy. So we're able to attract this audience that doesn't exist elsewhere. According to our partners at BBVS, this really has helped improve confidence in many cases, which is great. That's what we're hoping to see, is this increased confidence in STEM and ability to do STEM, interest in pursuing a STEM career. And then beyond the students, for parents, it often makes them aware that STEM is an option for their child. Many times they weren't considering this as a career. And it can also help just expand their perception of their child's abilities. So these are things that they might have thought were outside the abilities of their child, and expanding their perception in that way is maybe the best thing we could do, because they're going to go on and encourage their child down the road more than anybody else. TVIs, school districts, and vocational specialists. So these are the folks that are working with the students in the school after they finished up with Summer Academy and with STEM Extension. And beyond that, we also, for the past couple years, we're actually not doing it this year due to some of these budgetary shifts, but for the past couple years before STEM Extension weekend, we brought TVIs in to do a short training before the weekend. And we were impacting them through exposure to some novel techniques and adaptations that they might not have seen before. They might not have appreciated how teachable this body of this topic or these topics were for this population, and also the ease with which adaptations can be made. For example, one of our faculty members came up with this idea of using puffy paint to do like chemical diagrams. So they would just do that on the page, and then the student can feel the architecture of the molecule. And that's something that some folks haven't seen before. So just like the ease and the low cost of some of these adaptations that can be made is something that we're really happy to pass along. It gives these individuals an opportunity to do some professional development with university faculty, which is always valuable. And we're also sending them back hopefully more confident and well-versed students. So these are students that are ready to come into the STEM classroom and say, I belong here, here's what you can do to help me. Because self-advocating is really important, and having students that can self-advocate makes their lives hopefully easier. The faculty instructors, a lot of these impacts are going to be the same as the ones that are on the students, which you'll see on the next slide, but we're giving these faculty instructors exposure to a unique and underserved audience. Many of these faculty instructors don't get blind and visually, or individuals that are blind and visually impaired in their classes. So this might be their first exposure to working with this population. And if they were to encounter this population down the road, they would already have some experience with them. And so it builds their ability to work with and accommodate and advocate for these students. It also helps them develop techniques, you heard Katie talk about it in the video, that can be accessible, that can be applied outside of this population. It kind of forces them to reflect on their teaching practices and think about what they can modify to make things accessible for all students, not just this particular population. And lastly, it does give them activities and involvement that can perhaps be incorporated into grant applications. One of our faculty instructors is actually in the process of writing a career grant that he's going to be using some of these activities for. So these are activities that they can go and use down the road in other grant applications. Graduate and undergraduate students, again, much the same as the faculty. They're getting exposure to an audience with which they just might not have had any exposure to before. It gives them some ability to work with and advocate for these students. If they're in a class with a student that's blind and visually impaired, they can help them maybe navigate that class. They'll have the skills to do that. It gives them an opportunity to practice translating science and practice teaching. A lot of these students are going to be future teachers, so giving them an opportunity to work on their ability to communicate science to different audiences and just teach in general is really valuable. Penn State's able to strengthen their relationship with these different partners, builds institutional knowledge both for the individual faculty and for offices like ours in our ability to work with this particular audience, which is really valuable because a lot of the skills are translatable to different populations. It gets our faculty and students involved in broader impacts activities, which is what we are always striving to do more of. So having a venue to do that is great. It exposes Penn State facilities and programs to these students. So these students are all college bound and they have to decide on where to go to college. And this is actually a great recruitment tool for us to say, look, here are our facilities, here are our programs, we're ready to accommodate you, we're doing it now, so consider coming here. So Penn State has a recruitment tool built into this, and it's also participation in what we like to call a feel-good program. Everyone loves this program. Everyone from top to bottom thinks it's great. It's really easy to talk about because it's just full of benefits. So Penn State's involvement in this is great for image. BBVS and OVR, they are able to offer a diverse and robust program. STEM Extension has really helped, again, increase the diversity of students that they're recruiting. They're getting these students with a real interest in STEM that they might not have been getting before. They're able to advertise it as a really robust program and therefore attract these strong college-bound students to the program, which makes them look better. They can focus on interfacing with the students and not have to worry about the logistics of running STEM Extension. They might have never been able to incorporate this if they were saddled with running the logistics and recruiting the faculty and all that sort of stuff. They're able to show the progression of the students through the weekend, and therefore the benefit of the program. It makes Summer Academy look more valuable because we're doing more to increase student knowledge. And we've also provided them with a grant-funded model that they weren't aware they could plug into. They've told us time and again that if due to some funding changes, Summer Academy does have to move away from Penn State. They're thinking of taking this grant-funded model to other universities and saying, what would you think about doing this? What would you think about applying for a grant, being able to develop a program based around a grant? So this was something they hadn't considered before. Then finally, Patton. Patton is responsible for managing the TBIs, the Pennsylvania Teaching and Training Assistance Network. So this is sort of a statewide organization that's responsible for teacher professional development and teaching professional developments and people like TBIs. So we provide them with an official training opportunity for their TBIs. We gave them official what's called Act 48 training hours, which basically means it's official professional development for them. It gives their professionals an opportunity to interact with university officials. And we've also done a couple conference presentations, including this one, that have allowed us to disseminate the knowledge more broadly. So we're spreading it to a broader audience. A lot of the conferences we've been to in the past have been Patton associated. So a lot of folks that are plugged into that network have been able to be exposed to this program.
I don't go into this too much, but we do have other programs for students with other disabilities, a STEM camp for students on the autism spectrum, and a STEM Saturday program for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. And we've applied a lot of what we've learned from our partnership with BBVS on Summer Academy and STEM Extension to these programs, discussing goals in advance, having them help us recruit students that are a good fit, providing training and with logistics again. So for example, like every disability is completely different and requires different accommodations. So, for example, for students who are deaf and hard of hearing, the way you train people is to get students' attention. You can't say like, okay, everyone, we're gonna go this way, because you have to physically tap them on the shoulder, like stomp the ground so they can feel it shake and look around, like wave your hand in their eye gaze. It's just completely different little ways you have to interact. Also, a lot of times they'll get content solely from reading, and so they have a stenographer in classrooms when everyone's delivering content, and you have to give the stenographer like the fancy science words ahead of time, so they program it into the machine, so it's not like a QWERTY keyboard. They can't just type it out. So there's these things that we never would have known unless we'd known to ask about what are the logistics of how we can do these accommodations and put them into this program, because they're simple once you know and you can plan for them, but you cannot anticipate them if you don't know. So that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways from our work with EBS.
So I won't dive into this because we were running right up against the end of our time here, but STEM Extension, like we said, the funding is changing. There's been a shift in the mission, there's been a shift in funding sources. Whether or not the funding for the program was cut from the state, funding for the grant's gonna run out next year. So it's gonna force us to use all the lessons we've learned in terms of working with partners, recruiting partners, collaborating with partners, to help extend the longevity of this program moving forward. And again, we're really gonna have to keep these lines of communication open, and sort of work with them to hit these moving targets moving down the road, because we'd all like to see this program continue. So continuing to work with them and relying on these strong partnerships to continue to make this program available for these students is kind of our goal down the road. So figuring out how to do that.